Hi there, I'm Dr. Tracy. I'm a psychologist and couples therapist, and for the past almost 2 decades, I've been working with individuals and couples, helping them to improve their relationships, build healthy communication skills, and to set boundaries with people in their life, including their in-laws. It is my hope that my videos and my channel here will help you to build those healthy communication skills and learn the tools that I teach the people in my office every single day. Let's move into today's video. Does the sound of your partner's voice trigger you? Does something about your partner's face lead you to feel angry or defensive? For many people, the natural features of their partner results in this increased rush of emotions, leading them to get stuck in their negative cycle. This almost doesn't seem fair, right? Questions I commonly get sound like, I'm triggered by the sound of her voice. She should just be able to change her voice, right? Or she's automatically triggered by my face, but it's just my face. Or he comes in and has this heavy footstep that just sends me into rage. On one hand, being authentic means our partner has to accept who we are, including our natural expressions like our voice or our face or the movements of our body and maybe even our communication style, without taking everything so personal. On one hand, being authentic means that our partner accepts us for who we are. That includes our vocal tones, our expressions, our communication styles, without taking everything so personal. But then on the other hand, we want to consider how we impact each other and to practice knowing who the other person is and how we might be able to consider how we show up in the relationship dynamic. I know with my husband, I can come out and say something that might sound a little more sharp just because of my tone and my excitement and my passion to move things forward. And I know I have to be careful with that, but I also know that the work my husband does every single day is to acknowledge who I am and how I communicate and recognizing that it's not about him. I once had a friend ask me, Tracy, can my partner just not trigger me? And first, let me back up and contextualize the word trigger. When I use the word trigger, it actually comes from emotionally focused couples therapy because a trigger is what starts the negative interaction cycle. And it's used to describe something that is overwhelming, something that brings a rush of emotion, something that results in a reaction in some way to the environment. But in relationships, it's also really important to recognize that we can't change the other person and that we can't ask them to never trigger us. The triggers we experience, the things that set off the alarm bells in our brain, are actually our own responsibility. And so then it becomes our job to work through this. All right, as you know, you cannot change your partner, but we also want to try to understand what's happening here. So let's dig into this question, looking at both self and other, as there are two people in a relationship, and how we can start to move through this tricky question of, what do I do if their voice is so triggering for me? Now, whose responsibility is it? A relationship is about co-creation. If I am so sensitive to everything in the world, how much of that is mine to own? I do happen to be a highly sensitive person, so I recognize that when I get overwhelmed and there's so much noise in the kitchen, that it's not me yelling at my husband saying, why can't you be quiet? It's about me taking ownership and responsibility for the state of my nervous system in that moment and going in and taking a break. Self-regulation says I am going to take responsibility for what's happening inside of me right here, right now. And this is about me trying to calm my nervous system, to calm my body so that I can continue forward with this conversation. Expecting our partners to never trigger us is unrealistic, and it's going to set you and your partner up to get stuck in that negative cycle repeatedly. So something that's really important to practice alongside self-regulation, which, by the way, some of my go-to strategies are pushing my feet into the floor, wiggling my toes, going back and forth. But what we also want to practice is the skill of depersonalization. The skill of depersonalization is a foundational piece of creating differentiation in a relationship. I talk about building healthy interdependence in my book. I didn't sign up for this. And this is one of those skills that helps us to create that self and other experience. And what we know in a relationship is that you are two separate people. You have your own thoughts, feelings, opinions, desires, wishes, and values, and they're not supposed to be the same. When we depersonalize, we say things like, and we might even say this in our mind, they're having an experience that's separate from me. This isn't about me. We can also say this is my reaction. I don't have to put them onto them. So these are the things you want to practice when it comes to depersonalizing the other person's tone, facial expression, bodily expression, and practice soothing ourselves. Asking our partners to change is like asking them to conform. Remember that you chose your person for a specific reason early on in the relationship, but now it's important that we don't build resentment or we don't lose that connection by asking them to be somebody different. Now let's talk about if you're the one who is triggering your partner. So you are the one with the booming voice or the resting angry face or the one who likes to cross their arms. I can remember working with a client where I would watch their negative cycle take over right in front of me. As a couples therapist, I need to see the cycle in front of me so I can understand it. And one of those triggers was when one partner would cross their legs and they'd start to shake their leg, and then they would cross their arms, and then they would look up. And so in this moment, then, what that tells me is that this individual is flooded and overwhelmed. And that was so triggering for the other person, because then she went into the narrative of, look, he's not listening, I'm not important, he doesn't care what I have to say. It was really important in this example that he start to recognize how his ways of dealing with feeling flooded and overwhelmed were actually creating this sense of disconnection from them. And what became more important than saying, we need to change everything about you. That's not what we did. But instead, what was so helpful was for him to start actually vocalizing, hey, love, in this moment, this is one of those times where I'm feeling really overwhelmed. And so then she could start to see what he was experiencing rather than taking it personal, that he shut himself down and was looking up at the ceiling and away at her, not even interested in what she was saying. So we have to get curious about how our nonverbals and verbals do show up for the other person. And this really is about creating a secure, functioning relationship. This is something that Dr. Stan Tatkin talks about. I highly recommend his book, Wired for Love, in that the sense is we want to come together and hold in mind, who is this person that I'm in a relationship with? And if I know that my partner tends to get defensive when I communicate things, I'm going to learn to communicate things in a way that's going to help him understand I am not attacking him. And the same goes for the other way. If I can be self-reflective and understand that sometimes my voice can come off in a really booming, excitable, impactful way, then I'm going to learn to modulate that a little bit, especially in times where I'm trying to get my needs met. So if you are someone who communicates intensely, I want you to hear from me. This doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. If you're someone who has that resting, angry face, this doesn't mean there's something wrong with your face. What is important to consider, however, is this understanding between how you are trying to show up with your partner and to create that connection. Remember that our nonverbal communication accounts for 80% of communication. It's often not what you are saying, but it's how you are saying it. Notice even right here how I start to soften my tone, how I slow down my words, and notice the response inside of your body as a result of that. If I know that my voice is sharp to another person, then I can show up in a different way in an attempt to get my needs met. So I think it's also important for you to practice putting yourself in the other person's perspective. Consider the needs and experiences of your partner. What context are they living in? What just happened in their day? What were the experiences that they were having? And how might you then consider how you are going to impact them? Part of being in a healthy relationship is about understanding where your partner is at and holding them in mind and responding to them in that moment. It's also about not taking everything so personal. I think something else we could add into this conversation here is that emotional neglect shows up in relationships when we say to the other person, there's nothing wrong with my voice, you just need to accept me for who I am. You can imagine being on the receiving end of that, where your partner says, I'm not going to consider your feelings. I'm not going to consider how I impact you. This is a you issue and not me. And in fact, if someone is struggling with something, it's not just a them issue. It's a we issue. You get to be part of the solution. You can communicate and connect with them and know that your presence is part of healing and growing and stretching together. Let's zoom out on the relationship as a whole, recognizing that we all have triggers and that triggers do not necessarily mean that there is something bad or wrong with you, but instead they are information for you to be aware of. There's something happening there for you that you can go and work through. We can't ask other people to change completely, but we can let them know how they impact us. A healthy relationship is about co-creation and holding in mind who the other person is. If your partner wakes up frustrated one moment, instead of taking it personally, you remember, right, the kids were up 4 times last night and nobody got a wink of sleep. This collaboration and connection helps to protect your relationships and ensure that you two are on the same page. I have 2 resources available for you if you are looking for more support. The first is my 10 free scripts for defensiveness. This can help you figure out how to reply to your partner when they step into that common space of defensiveness. And before that even happens, you might even consider exploring my scripts for difficult conversations. This is one of my favorite resources because I outline all of the difficult conversations that show up in our relationship dynamic, and I show you exactly how to move out of those tough moments so you can stop having the same repeating fights over and over again. It's not easy to break through these personal triggers and to heal our relationships, but with curiosity and ownership and accountability, you and your partner can make meaningful changes together. If you found this video helpful, give me a like and don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.